You know, since this did so well financially, you might say that King Leonidas was briefly king of the box office. What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to my channel and another installment of my Zack Snyder review series, where I'm going through all of Zack Snyder's films that I have yet to review for this channel. Today, we're talking about his second film, 300. Let me know before we begin what your thoughts on 300 were in the comments below, and make sure to hit that thumbs up button as it helps me out immensely by getting my channel out there. And if you're new here, I hope you consider hitting that subscribe button so you can stay up to date with reviews of new releases, older films, hidden gems, and so much more on a near daily basis. But let's jump right into it and let's talk about 300. This stars Gerard Butler as King Leonidas of Sparta, who, along with a force of 300 men, fight the Persians at Thermopylae in 480 BC. So, just so you know, as I often do with my reviews of other older films, this will contain spoilers. So, if you haven't seen 300 and wish to know nothing, this is your spoiler warning. Go watch the movie, then come back to this. But anyway, here we go. Based on the comic book miniseries of the same name by Frank Miller, who also served as a consultant and executive producer, this is one of only a few Zack Snyder films where Snyder himself had a hand in writing the screenplay, co-writing it with Kurt Johnstad and Michael B. Gordon. And this was a project that Snyder has been wanting to do for a while, as he even attempted to make this before his debut, Dawn of the Dead. And this film, as well as the original comic book series, is a fictionalized retelling of historical events, with many of the main characters being real, but a lot of the events being presented in a very stylized manner, and a number of fantastical creatures, along with people with exaggerated features, are included, kind of in the vein of Miller's Sin City, which itself was just adapted to a film right before this. And because of the inclusion of such characters, it has a distinct comic book feel. And whereas Dawn of the Dead was simply just successful at the box office, this was a massive hit, grossing $456 million at the box office against a $65 million budget, as opposed to Dawn of the Dead grossing $100 million against a $26 million budget. It was released in both regular theaters and IMAX and set record numbers for an IMAX opening. It has the 24th highest grossing opening weekend in box office history, and it put both Snyder and Gerard Butler on the map. And it went on to become heavily parodied in the next few years, mainly for its infamous "This is Sparta" line.
Madness. This is Sparta!
As well as for its visual style, distinct characters, and the overly expressive delivery of its dialogue. Like Dawn of the Dead, I didn't see this one at the time it was in theaters, but I was in high school when it was released, and I remember walking the hallways and hearing everyone imitating Gerard Butler in some way, or raving about how epic it was, and how I needed to see it. Though I didn't get to watch it till about a year or so later, and I thought it was just okay. And I was so underwhelmed by it that, despite buying the DVD then, I never got around to watching it again, until I sat down and watched it for only the second time ever for this review. And my opinion hasn't changed all that much. Now, do I dislike it? No. It's fine. But it's not this grand, sweeping, awesome movie that gets me pumped up or anything. At best, it's mindless fun, though I don't consider it a must-watch or anything. But let's start with what I liked about this. The main draw for this movie is the action. And yes, that is one of its best parts. I said in my Dawn of the Dead review that Snyder showed early on he has a good eye for staging very exciting action scenes, and that's again on display here, with a lot more emphasis on overly stylized sequences of the Spartans engaging in sword and shield combat. And a number of these sequences are fun, with characters leaping from distances to go in for a kill shot, grandiose moments of characters kicking each other, punching each other, you see things like limbs getting hacked off and people getting attacked from nearly all sides, and if that's all you want in a movie, then you're going to be satisfied here. It goes all in on its R rating, and it doesn't hold back, so whenever we see the Spartans in action, it's fun. And the visual style is also pretty solid too. The desaturated color palette isn't something I'm always a big fan of, but I know they were trying to replicate the exact look of the comic book, which had that same almost sepia-like tone to it. And there's almost this feel of an old Hollywood film to this. Like, if you look at old Hollywood films from the 30s and 40s, for certain movies, even though they look nice, they clearly look like they're on a set. Everything in the one location where the scene's set are real props and designs, but then you get one look at the background and it's clearly painted or something, even if it does look good. And that's the same style employed here. I know they filmed this in a studio with a digital blue screen backdrop for most of the settings, and there was only one scene filmed outdoors, and I didn't mind that. I really like a lot of older Hollywood films, and I like newer movies that pay tribute to that style of filmmaking in some way. And while this was doing so more to make sure the style of the comic book was replicated, it still reminded me heavily of that, and I appreciate it. As for everything else, that's where I'm considerably more mixed. So, for one thing, this is the first film where Snyder's distinct visual style is utilized, mainly the use of slow motion, and he doesn't hold back in showing it off, as we get it as early as 5 minutes into the film, where someone gets punched and blood's flying out of their mouth in a slowed down moment. And we'll see this pretty consistently throughout the film. Now, there were times it was cool, including one moment where Michael Fassbender, as one of the soldiers, leaps up for an attack and it slows down, and that was nice. It was also fun when it was used in the This is Sparta scene.
This is Sparta!
But sometimes it's done a little too much. Like, we'll be in the middle of a big fight scene and there's a good flow to it, and all of a sudden Snyder throws in a slow-mo shot and it throws me off. It didn't always feel like it was placed at an appropriate moment, and because of that, it comes off as a bit distracting. The film's tone is also very interesting. It's like, the film wants you to have fun as we watch the Spartans in action, but there are times we're meant to get the feel that the story's something we're meant to take seriously, through a few dialogue-driven sequences. Yet, the way a lot of the actors deliver said dialogue, through this overly expressive, very loud, highly exaggerated shouting, you're also meant to have fun hearing them be a little hammy and spew all these lines that were clearly asking to be turned into catchphrases. It felt like it was trying to have its cake and eat it too. And I mean, there are some memorable lines here, like, of course, this is Sparta.
This is Sparta!
As well as Tonight We Dine in Hell, and a few others. And the lines that click work really well. But a good majority of the dialogue is done in this overly dramatic style, where characters are shouting everything, and because not all of these lines land that well, it does become a little grating at points. Mainly because they're saying platitudes rather than anything of real meaning. And if that style of line delivery doesn't totally win you over, it'll be hard to love the film. At least that was the case for me. Because there's not much substance to it beyond its cool action scenes and its many attempts to sound epic and grandiose. Now, I'll admit, part of this could stem from the fact that I'm not always the biggest fan of period dramas, even if they're action movies, as is this case. Even in films that are more substantive, I always felt like there's something of a disconnect where I had a difficult time really caring for a number of the characters. That's not the case for every period film, but for a lot of them. It's easily my least favorite subgenre, so that may be a part in why I never loved this film. Though that aside, the film still feels like it can be too much style over substance. It's been called a very one-track mind kind of movie, and it's not hard to see why. These aren't characters that are built up too much to be people we really form a connection with. We get a brief opening montage of Leonidas' early days prior to the main events, but other than that, these characters are mostly hollow and one-dimensional, and we're supposed to like them more because they can kick ass or they say cool things. But if you're not on board with all that, your enjoyment of the film's more than likely only going to go so far. Even the villain, Xerxes, doesn't come off as anyone too intriguing. Sure, there's a distinct look to the character, but that look is what you remember more about him, rather than because he says or does anything worth noting. He doesn't have any memorable lines or any moments where he feels like such a huge threat himself. Other than a scene where Leonidas confronts him face to face, he's mostly off to the side giving orders. And when the Spartans all die in battle at the end, now you do feel a little something. I mean, these are the characters you're following around for much of the film after all, but I feel the only reason you do feel anything is due to the fact that the actors put as much effort as they could put in to make these characters somewhat enjoyable. The main reason I liked Leonidas was because of Gerard Butler himself. The same goes with Michael Fassbender's character and pretty much all of the other Spartans. I cared a little because of the actors themselves, and it would have hit so much harder though had they been written with more substance. Now there is one storyline that's actually kinda not bad, and that's Leonidas' wife Gorgo, played by Lena Headey, approaching the Spartan council for reinforcements, only to be tormented by a corrupt politician named Theron, played by Dominic West. This is a storyline not featured in the original comic book, with Theron not appearing, while Gorgo only appears at the very beginning. And yeah, this wasn't so bad. Not that these are particularly deep characters either or anything, I think it was included more as just a way to give us something of a breather in between the moments of non-stop action with the Spartan army, but the reasons I mainly like these scenes were due to the two actors' performances. Leonidas was great, while Dominic West gave a very scene-chewing performance as this slimy politician, though without going into too much of that super hammy delivery the way the Spartan army did. So it stayed within the tone of the rest of the film, while also giving us something a little different. Now, I also don't know how much of a hand Frank Miller himself actually had in the consulting process, and if he contributed anything to the elements that I may have disliked, and I only want to mention that because while Miller's early work, some of which I've read, is highly regarded, it was around this time where he was kind of on the decline. His written work from the 2000s on, while I haven't read it, isn't supposed to be all that good from what I hear, and his few film contributions weren't all that good either, with the exception of Sin City, which I really enjoyed. But I know after this he tried his hand at writing and directing his own film, The Spirit, which I never saw, but I heard it wasn't all that good. Again, because it was a lot of style over substance. I only wanted to bring this up just because, while this is ultimately Snyder's film, I don't know how much of a hand Miller himself actually had in the process, and if it was a lot, I would have wondered how much this would have changed if he stayed out of it. Either way, what we ultimately got was a mixed bag. Now, I don't dislike 300, but I didn't love it either. I feel more or less the same way about it now as I did when I first saw it over a decade ago. It has some cool action scenes, the hammy delivery by some of the actors can be fun, with the actors themselves doing a solid job with the material, and the visual comic book-like style can be really nice. But the fact it's mostly a hollow movie and that it can rely a little too much on the same bag of tricks over and over again can get a little tiring. So it leads to some fun moments being followed up quickly by moments you can take or leave. So if you like these period action movies, or if you don't mind its overall style, I think you'll have a lot more fun with this. And I know there are those who still love this movie to this day. For me though, it's just fine. 300 gets a 6 out of 10. And that's a low 6, I'll be honest. I think the good just outweighs the bad here, but only by so much. Again, it's fine, it's just nothing I need to watch again anytime soon, to be perfectly blunt there. But stay tuned, up next in the series will be my review of Watchmen. But in the meantime, let me know, did you see 300 or are you planning to see it, and what were your thoughts? Do you have a favorite historical drama? Do you have a favorite Gerard Butler movie? Let me know in the comments below so we can discuss. Also, if you enjoyed this video, please like it and share it, and for more movie reviews and film discussion, please make sure to hit that subscribe button to stay updated. Thanks for watching everyone, and keep having fun with film.